All right, so I guess just start off with telling a little bit about yourself.
Oh man, okay. I'm Phillip Hall and teach here at UTD. I teach mostly animation courses, Animation 1, Animation 2, Animation 3. I also teach an elective called Animation for Games, as well as I do help out with Animation Studio. This semester I'm teaching animation processes. I teach a lot of animation courses. I'm a character animator. Worked at a bunch of different studios, so I don't know what you want to get into with that.
Well, what sort of studios did you work at?
So I worked at Blue Sky Studios on Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs. I worked on Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel, and Yogi Bear at Rhythm and Hues Studios. Also worked at Dr. D Studios in Sydney, Australia, and Sony Pictures Animation on Hotel Transylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the main ones for film.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess go ahead and tell a little bit, I guess, about your experience while at those studios.
Well, man, my experience when I first started at Blue Sky on Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs, I thought I knew how to animate, and I thought getting hired there meant that I knew how to animate, but I found out pretty quickly that there was a ton that I did not know that I still needed to learn. And my experience there probably was something I didn't anticipate. I didn't expect that I would. I was pretty humbled being there, honestly, because you walk in and all of a sudden you're with all of these animation heroes that you had, and you realize that they are really, really, really good. Like, they're super good. And some of the first shots that I had, I struggled with. I struggled with a lot. I was late on my deadlines, and it looked like I was really falling behind. But one of the great things about Blue Sky was that they really rally behind the people that they hire. And I don't know, along the process, somehow it just started to click for me, and I got better and better. And I just always appreciated that experience. It was hard and it was tough, but I always appreciated that experience because they really did encourage me, and they felt like they hired me for a reason, and that reason was obviously they saw that I had talent and they wanted to cultivate that. So it was rewarding for them to see me finally get it. Working at Rhythm and Hues, that was one of the best experiences I had in America. It was far more laid back than Blue Sky. The culture there was that there was no rush. Just take your time, do the best you can. A lot of it was, I mean, obviously when you're working in this industry, there's a lot of long hours, and that just comes with the territory. But at Rhythm and Hues, it just felt like everybody got along extremely well. It almost felt like I was getting paid to go to camp. You know what I mean? Like a summer camp. And yeah, it was, there's a lot of experiences there. There's a lot of great friendships that are made there. You're working in these long hours together, and it always helps when you work with people who are friendly and funny. That's where I met Sean McComber, who was a professor here, and it was because of the experiences we had together at Rhythm and Hues that he asked me to come teach at UTD. You want me to go through all of them? Like,
No, those are good, but
those are good? Okay, yeah. What else you got?
If I recall, you mentioned at the beginning of the year you also worked at Rockstar for other video games.
Yeah,
as well.
I did work on a few video games. I didn't necessarily work. I wasn't employed by Rockstar, but we did work for Rockstar on Red Dead Redemption, and I worked for a studio that did facial animations, and so. They get contracted by actually a lot of video game companies. They do a lot of the cinematics for those games, and we were working with a team with Rockstar to develop the cinematics for Red Dead Redemption. And this company that I work for, Image Metrics, they had developed their own proprietary software by which the animator could set a keyframe, and there's like these little cameras that are like a rig set up for the motion capture actors. And so it tracks everything that they do with their face. It was pretty gross because you would be looking down someone's mouth the whole time that you're trying to do this. You're trying to match their lip sync and facial performance. But it wasn't rotoscoped. It was really interesting. That none of that was like, they didn't have like the little dots or anything on their face. They were They were using their own proprietary software that drove the keyframe animation in the game. It's pretty cool. I wish I could talk about it more than that, but there's like some non-disclosure agreement stuff that goes along with that too.
Right. So you mentioned you met Sean at Rhythm and Hues, and he suggested that you come to UTD.
Yeah.
So what kind of made that big push? I mean, other than him.
I think that obviously you want to work with people that you enjoy working with, and that works both ways. Like Sean and I were friends. We weren't office mates, but we were right next to each other at Rhythm and Hues when we moved to the new building in El Segundo, and so I mean we were friends, and that always helps when you work with your friends. You're almost guaranteed it's going to be a good experience. So they originally they asked me about coming to UTD back in 2012, and I was just coming off of Hotel Transylvania. And I had taught before. I've taught at the Art Institute of San Diego, California, San Diego, and I've taught at the Art Institute of Virginia Beach. And before that, I taught at Huntington University in Indiana. So I've taught character animation before, but it was something that I just love teaching. Sometimes I would take a break from working in the industry and go teach for a little while and kind of recharge my batteries. But Sean called me, and I had a phone interview with Todd Fector and Eric Farrar, and they wanted me to come out for an interview, and I just told them, I had another job lined up in Virginia Beach, and I couldn't go without pay. I think I was rolling off on Hotel Transylvania in May or June, probably May, and I just couldn't go till August or September not getting paid. I mean, it was like a quarter of the year. So I thanked them and appreciated it, but I thought, that's not going to happen. And then I think it was 2 or 3 years later, Sean called me up again and said, "Well, would you really reconsider? Because we would love to have you. We're growing so fast as a school. We need extra animation professors." So I was just at a time in my life where I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm good with coming out there and doing that full time." And I would love to go back to the industry, but that's not one of my priorities right now in my life. So it worked out perfect timing.
So while teaching here and other places, what is it that you tend to look for in other students' work, and what says, okay, they're ready to advance or move on or whatever?
Well, specifically speaking from character animation, you can tell when a student is ready to move on when they've mastered like a bouncing ball, or they've mastered a bouncing ball with a tail. They make really good poses. They understand what posing is and the importance of posing. As you go on, we're trying to develop the program where there's a step to each process, to each part of growth, and you can go back and look and say, yeah, I should be in animation too, because I totally understand these principles. I understand what a good pose is. I understand squash and stretch and arcs and all the things we talk about in those classes. For me, the thing that I love the most about that whole process is that I was a student and I didn't know anything about the stuff that we teach now. I didn't, and to be honest with you, a lot of that stuff didn't know how to be. It wasn't really explained. When I came along back in the late 90s and early 2000s, everything was software driven. If we could just get the software, then we could create these amazing things. So software was taught to us, but not the principles that go into creating animation. And 3D was really new. 3D is still technically new, but we're applying all of these old principles from the 30s that were developed from Disney, the 9 Old Men, the 12 Principles of Animation. And they work in 2D animation, they work in stop motion animation, they work in 3D animation. They're going to work forever. So when I learned those, it was like, oh my gosh, I get it. And so there is a certain joy, there is a certain gift that I get just sharing that information with students so that they know the things that I didn't know when I was in school. So hopefully when they graduate, they're ready for employment in this industry.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about like all the stuff you've been in, but what kind of made you decide to go into animation?
Wow, that's a good question. I got into animation because I was kind of good at drawing, and About in the second grade, we watched Pinocchio, and we had this little mock job fair kind of thing. My teacher set up, and I just said I wanted to be a cartoonist. We watched Pinocchio, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I didn't even know what an animator was, but I just kept saying that, from grade to grade, from year to year, I'm going to be an animator. Once I figured out that's what they were, and just to think that somebody got paid, somebody actually could earn a living making cartoons and films, I was like, yeah, sign me up. That's what I want to do. So I've always loved video games. I still do. I love comic books. I love movies. I love video games. I love TV shows. Anything animated, I'm into it. So it just came out of a love for the medium.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Kyle.